I'd like to extend a very warm welcome this afternoon in the UK and this morning in San Francisco to Tamara Rojo as the latest guest on the Culture Decoded podcast. In a moment, I'll explain why I've asked Tamara to come onto this podcast, but the headline of the Culture Decoded might indicate this is all about fine arts, but actually we're going to explore much more broadly than that. Tamara Rojo, for those of you who are not familiar with her career, is currently artistic director at San Francisco Ballet, which is, I won't say the pinnacle, because I have a feeling there's more to come from you, Tamara, but it's the latest high point for you in a career that spans 30 years of professional dance at the very highest level, going from your native Spain to Glasgow Ballet, ENB, and then the Royal Ballet for 10 years or so, reaching the very top of her craft and with a generation of extremely talented dancers at the time in the Royal Ballet, and then taking on the artistic director role at English National Ballet, which is a role she filled for 10 years, and a transformation that's been lauded internationally in terms of what Tamara was able to achieve. So that might paint a bit of a picture. I don't have time to go through all the awards and honours, but you should understand from that Tamara is a bit of a rock star in the world of ballet. But I plan, as well as talking about what that takes, to extend that learning outwards to take much broader lessons around leadership, around mindset, and around what it takes to reach and stay at the top of your field. So Tamara, a very warm welcome to you. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
And I know you're very busy, so I particularly appreciate you sparing the time. Before we started the recording, Tamara was telling me everything that she's got on at the moment, so I'm particularly appreciative of you sparing the time today. So let's start with the English National Ballet. You spent 20 years or so of your professional life in London, I believe.
27.
27. London misses you, Tamara.
No, thank you. I miss him.
But talk a little bit about the transformation you led at English National Ballet, because it was a 10-year journey and it had many chapters, but it really was quite an extraordinary transformation of the company. It would be great to hear you take us through a little bit about that. What was the story and what was your ambition, and how did that ambition develop over the time you were there?
So English National Ballet was really the company I joined when I first came to England. I was in Glasgow in Scottish Ballet for just over 6 months. And then I joined English National Ballet for 3 years. And as a young dancer, I was 20 years old, I just fell in love with the motto of the company, with the touring spirit, with the generosity of the artists in that company that really believed that art forms can change lives, that people can come into a theater and find meaning in a way that they cannot do in other ways or in other spaces. And the difficulty of touring, the sacrifices that families have to do, the overnights, all of that is hard, had also such camaraderie and such generosity of spirit, but also so much meaning, that I fell in love with the company. And after 3 years, because of disagreements with the management, I decided to leave, and I wanted to join the Royal Ballet because of a particular repertoire. I really loved the repertoire of Kenneth Macmillan. I wanted to perform all those ballets. I also wanted to dance with artists like Carlos Acosta and Jonathan Cope. And I thought that the Royal Ballet was a center of creativity, because that's how it had been at the beginning of its history. The Royal Ballet came from the Ballet Russe of Diaghilev. Ninette de Valois herself was part of that company. It harvested amazing choreographers, and I thought I was entering a place that was the hub of creation. And instead, I entered a place that was in love with its own myth and in love with the history. And it wasn't even, in my opinion, a long enough history to fall in love with. It was a young company, but any standards of ballet companies, and yet it had managed to become the establishment, and to, in my 12 years there, to actually have very little room for creativity or risk taking. And so during those 12 years, English National Ballet was in decay. It was losing audiences, it was losing purpose, it was losing artists. And then when the time came where they were looking for a new artistic director, I heard that the Arts Council had decided to stop funding it. And for me, I just felt that that was something that could not happen. For the health of the nation, for the health of the performing arts, for the health of the ballet in the UK, but more importantly for all those audiences around the country that waited a whole year for ENB to go and perform for them. And that was the highlight for many of them. And they will do ballet for a whole year. Little kids will do ballet in a studio for a whole year and just think ENB will come in the autumn and I will see ballet again. And I just felt it just could not happen. And so I put my hat in the ring, and I did talk to the Arts Council at the time. I said, I will not tolerate it. I will fight you all the way. I will make ENB such an important company that you will not be able to do this. And that's what I set out to do. I set out to make it the innovative company, the company of the people, the company that you could go and see for £12, the company that was performing more than any other, and invest in new voices, voices that were very British, like Akram Khan, and that the establishment wasn't welcoming in other companies to create. I decided we were going to be the company that invited the diversity of the cultural voices in the UK, and the company that invited women to choreograph, because in the 12 years I was in the Royal Ballet, but actually on 21 years, not a single woman had ever been commissioned to create a ballet. And so there were so many, I think, areas where I felt there was room to improve the art form. And I felt that ENB, because it was a lean machine, it really had no fat, it could do it. It didn't have to drag a huge amount of bureaucracy. The change could happen very quickly. Literally from one year to another, we started to commission a different type of work, and we started to include a much wider variety of the artistic landscape of the United Kingdom. And then we started to export it. I was going to be the flagship of the United Kingdom performing arts, the flagship of ballet. And indeed, it happened very quickly.
Well, it happened very quickly, but the state it was in and the trajectory it was on when you took over must have required a lot of people to change their minds about a lot of things, whether it's the funding, the trustees, perhaps, and the performers themselves. How substantial a task was that, or were you pushing on an open door in the way that you tell the story? I suspect not. I suspect it wasn't so easy.
I think even when an organization knows it has to change, the individuals always feel that it's somebody else that has to change in the organization. Very rarely have I heard someone said, this organization has to change and I have to change with it. Because if we don't all change, the organization cannot change. So even when there is a consensus that the organization was going in the wrong path and that things needed to change, the individuals themselves often don't want to change, because change is hard. You get used to anything. You get used to even bad things. And changing habits and changing routines, especially, in ballet, very often the type of personality that is attractive to being a ballet dancer are people that like discipline, that like certainty, that like to be given very clear directions. This is correct and this is incorrect. That's how you do the step. That's how you perform some leg. This is the choreography. Follow the lines, follow the steps, follow the music. And so when you start undoing, it is somewhat uncomfortable, and it can create fear. I did have an extraordinary chairman, Justin Bickle, who sadly passed away very young. He was my right and left hand. He was a young man, a visionary man in his own right, a businessman who gave me so many skills. I mean, he's the first person that sat me down and said, okay, let's do the route. Like, how do we get from A to B? I know where we are, and you are very clear on where we want to be. Let's plan it together. And we sat at his board, at his office, at the board kind of a room, and we drew the map together. And I think it was the fact that he was working alongside me and supporting my vision at chair level, at board level, and that he also had to step in as an executive director, because at the time we didn't have one. So having that strong partnership that will support the change in the administrative side and at board level, and in talking to Arts Council together, and then I could concentrate in the studio, in the change in the art itself. I think that was the key to the success, that I didn't have to fight every battle, you know. But to be honest, I think the easiest part was my part, in a certain extent, the studio culture, the creativity. That was to a certain extent the easiest part to change. The other side, you know, how do we talk about ourselves? What kind of marketing are we going to do? Which venues are we going to visit? We've done this for a certain amount of time. Why are we doing it? Questioning every single thing, every step, every decision, every image we share, every tagline, bringing in new partners to reimagine how we spoke about ourselves, trying to create international partnerships with venues. It's a lot of work. It's just a very big turnaround. But I could have never done it if I didn't really have the support of my chairman.
That picture you paint, Tamara, of the shift in accountability from the company needs to change, but I'm not prepared to change, to I need to be part of the change, is not unique to ballet. All organizations struggling or facing into some sort of change struggle with exactly the same challenge. Can you talk a little bit about how you stimulated that? Because there's such broad universal application for the challenge of creating change through individual accountability for that change. I'd love to hear about actually how you did that.
I think in two ways. At the beginning is the hardest part. The beginning is climbing up a hill. And I think for everyone, just because nobody's sure of what we're doing. So the beginning is a lot about communicating the goal, communicating the ultimate point, communicating the direction. What is it that we're trying to achieve with all of the teams, you know? Of course, with the creative teams, but with, you know, marketing, with development. What is it that we're trying? What is the direction we're trying to go? And then, frankly, things change fast when there is success. The moment that things start to look great from the outside, the moment that the people that work in the organization hear from their friends and hear from audience or hear from outsiders, oh my God, I saw this or I read this. This sounds exciting. You must be so proud to be part of that. People then feel the reward. So that's why I think, to a certain extent, it's important to go fast, to make the change fast so that the reward comes fast. Because if you drag it for a very long time and the reward takes too long, people can't feel unmotivated. It's very difficult to sustain the motivation for, 12-hour a day work hours and changing all of the things you were relying upon if there is no reward. So in a way, I think one thing that happened at EMB and is happening again here in San Francisco is that I lean in really hard in the first season. It's also important, I think, externally. It was very important for people to pay attention to both these institutions, English National, because they've been around for a very long time. And so you can talk about change, but unless you show it, people are not going to really know what is it that you're changing. And so the first season, I lean in very, very hard into what is it that we're putting on the stage, how are we presenting ourselves when we create images, how we're talking ourselves, very, very quickly, very fast, so that the reaction, positive or negative, also comes very quickly.
And do you, in that process, I can see how that feedback loop works. Do you, in the process, quite quickly see who's up for the journey and who's not?
I mean, they do. It's not up to me, really. I want everybody to come up on this journey. I think everybody has something to bring. But very quickly, some people declare themselves not wanting to. People tend to be quite honest about their feelings, I feel. And they're vocal, and if they're not happy, they will make you know it. And I think what you do with that is the question. Because I think that there is room to listen into some of that. You need to listen to the feedback where people are uncomfortable or unhappy with some of your decisions, of course. But it's also true that you also need to decide if this is the right path. Then you have to let people make other things, make their own choices. There is a point where you can't convince everybody, and you cannot make everybody happy, especially in institutions of this size. We're not small. Like, we have hundreds of people working for us. So some people will find reward in this new direction, and they will find their own personal success and their own personal achievement, and that will be what they feed from to continue to go into that direction. And some people won't. Either they don't have the capacity, or they don't have the inclination, or they don't agree with the artistic vision. And most of the time, like I said, they make the decision themselves to not continue in the journey.
Yes, that makes sense, and it's a very it's providing people the autonomy that ultimately they crave. There's a few themes that I'd like to pick up on from what you've talked about, but one of the things that's always fascinated me about ballet, there's a couple of different angles, but one is the how do you gel together a group, a company of individual performers, all of whom are trying to optimize individually, as they should, as individual dancers and athletes, into a coherent performance so that the audience gets a story as a result of those individual performances. I'm really interested to hear your perspective, because you've been an artistic director now for a number of years across different continents, and you've danced as a principal dancer across so many different companies and performances. I'd love to hear how that works in practice.
I'm not sure I have a simple answer to that, other than by the time a dancer makes it to a professional ballet company, he already has a certain mentality of the pursuit of excellence. This is something that you need to come to terms with very early on in your training. By age 9, you have to decide whether you want to dance for fun, or whether you want to be good at what you do, whether you want to be the best. And whether that is the best in the world or the best you can be, doesn't matter. But whether you have that pursuit of something extraordinary, of an excellent skill, an excellent technique. And so, from every 3,000 little girls that wear a tutu when they're 5, one makes it. That one person has a specific mentality and a training and a common understanding that the art form survives as long as it continues to pursue this excellence, this constant renovation, this constant, a bit like the Olympic athletes, You want to build upon the legacy of the past, and you want to leave the next legacy for the future. And in order to do that, you need to be individually the best you can be. But in the pursuit of that individuality, you also understand that the performance is a commonality, is something that has to occur when we all work together to deliver this piece of art. And there is also a difference, to a certain extent, in the mentality between a corps de ballet dancer that is about unison and about disappearing in the group, like you see in a big flock of swans in Swan Lake, that the mentality and the skill set that a corps de ballet dancer and the resilience that they have is specific to their trade and their position in the company. And there is a different mentality often in a principal dancer, which has this responsibility to lead the company. When you are a principal dancer and you dance in front of a corps de ballet, you're not dancing alone. They are helping you, but you also have to not let them down. Your performance has to be of such excellence that their hard work is rewarded. And so there is a feeding that occurs, You feed as a principal dancer from their support, their resilience, their consistency, their professionalism, and their generosity. And in exchange, you have to deliver a performance that ensures that the audience will come back and that the tickets will be sold. We have a common responsibility. Companies have now dancers from all over the world. In San Francisco, we have 18 nationalities. At EMB, in over 70 dancers, we had 21 nationalities, different cultures, often different religions, different values, but one common set of principles about what the art form is and the role of everybody in delivering the performances. The audience is God, ultimately. Nobody else is.
There's so many aspects of what you said which are not unique to ballet. The pursuit of excellence, I'd like to explore that a bit more, because you, and I'm sure you hate these stories about your dancing through injury, or the dedication to the craft. And so what does that mean for you when you talk about pursuit of excellence, whilst also maintaining, which ultimately is about achieving the very highest standard you possibly can, whilst at the same time learning and adapting, and at the same time achieving the balance with your own health, your own equanimity, your own stable state of mind in that? How does that play out? Because when you're at the very top, because the pursuit of excellence can become consuming, and it can go too far. So how do you teach younger dancers in your company now about managing that balance?
I think society has changed a lot in that, and I think the new dancers are far more aware of that work-life balance, and they are, rightly so, I think, far more demanding in what is a reasonable expectation. We also have far more now resources. So we have psychological specialists, or performing arts, or psychologists, and nutritionists, and physicians. And so we do have now proper medical teams to support the dancers at their highest level, emotionally, mentally, and physically, which of course when I started didn't exist. So that's I think a great change in the art form, and a much better situation. I don't know how. I do think it's strange, because I think we've gone from a culture when I was young where excellence was something that could justify almost anything. You would sacrifice anything for it, to a point where excellence is a dirty word. And I think there's a balance in the middle. I don't see why you should not aspire to be the best that you can be. And that's what I mean by excellence. You need to aspire to be the best that you can be. But also includes being healthy, having a good mind, having an external life, having partnerships, having a family. You cannot be the best that you can be if you're insular. And you cannot be the best that you can be if you're not questioning yourself constantly and accepting feedback and rethinking goals and being open to change. Because then you are stuck in a tunnel of blindness. So the pursuit of excellence is not something you do in isolation in a dark room by punishing yourself. It's something that you do by opening yourself up to all of the possibilities and the information and the resources that exist in order to be the best that you can be as a person and as a professional.
That's a great way to frame it. I, I I know that at certain stages of your career, not yours necessarily, but one's career, it is difficult to be that open because you're so focused on making progress. So I think that's a really important message. But I want to link what you've just said to what you mentioned when you talked about the Royal Ballet, and use it as a way of talking about the role of ambition in your career and more generally. You talked about the Royal Ballet as a rather inwards-facing, self-admiring organisation, which is naturally, for those in it, it's quite constraining. I feel as though in the UK we have all these ancient institutions and they can sometimes stifle creativity and stifle individuality. And you described ENB as a limitless possibility that was there for you, which obviously appealed to your desire to expand people's experience of the arts, and its touring role is still part of its charter. But it also obviously appealed to you because there was something about the Royal Ballet that constrained where you thought you could go in your career. And that openness is quite striking, the way you talked about excellence. Can you talk a little bit about the role ambition plays for you, both in you and your career, but also in how you go about what you do? Because I think that would be the one word that would be used to describe your your tenure at ENB was just ambition. And there's not enough of it around in many fields. So I'd love to hear what that means for you and where that comes from.
I actually don't think I am that ambitious, funnily enough. And I know that people describe me as such. I am very comfortable being ambitious on behalf of others. I want people to feel, I think that one thing I used to say to the dancers at ENB is, I want you to be proud of what you are and what you do. I want you because this career is so fleeting, I want you to, when you're 60 years old and you look back, say, I was there when it happened. I was there at the best time of that company. I was there where we were leading the world. So in that way, I am ambitious in that I want things to matter. If I'm going to do something, I want it to mean something and I want it to matter. I don't want to do things because we've always done it this way, which was an answer I got very often at the Royal Opera House. This is the way we've always done it. And the thing is, I think what does drive me more and what has served me well and has kind of pushed me to change companies or take on responsibilities like artistic director is I am very questioning. I question everything. And so, because I am an outsider, I didn't come from any of the institutions that are traditionally admired in the ballet world. I didn't train at the Bolshoi or the Mariinsky or the Paris Opera or the Royal Ballet or La Scala. I trained at a tiny private school in Madrid. And then my first career was in an equally small company in Madrid. But I saw that small company could have an impact. We were creating interesting things. We were going to festivals. We were already, putting our grain of sand in the art form. We were creating something that was making other people that had better resources do better things, because we were challenging the status quo. And so I think that's what has always pushed me forward, is this, whenever I am part of an organization, I see it from the outside as this outsider that has somehow managed to get in an institution, and I see why is it that this institution has become this way. Because also I love reading history. I love reading history of our art form. So I knew that the original intention of Salle d'Eswell's ballet, that eventually will become Royal Ballet, was not that. It was creativity. It was having a unique voice, a very British voice. It was investing in new voices to bring them to the art form. And so I was fascinated by how had that twisted itself so much. And it is that questioning that has always made me feel like, well, I don't agree with this. Why has it happened? How can we prevent it from happening? Is there room for change, or should I find my own change? And I guess that's what drives me when I am in charge. You know, I look at the company at ENB and I go, well, what is it that was our purpose? Is this purpose still relevant? What kind of organization do we need to be today to be relevant? And what are the steps we need to take? And so in a way, that's kind of the shape of my ambition. It's not a personal kind of winning anything. It's if we're going to live this life, if we're going to do this thing, if we're going to be this, what is the best possible version of that? And then let's do it.
I guess other people see that as ambitious, but that feels to you as being making the most of the opportunity and having as big an impact as possible. So ambition I didn't want to use the word as personal ambition, but it was just not seeing the limits, not seeing the barriers that other people see.
Yes, I agree. But that's, I think, because I don't come from those institutions. I have found that dancers that go from the age of 9 into a school, whichever school it is, whether it's the Bolshoi or Paris Opera or the Royal, and then they continue their journey within that same institution, tend to take things as law. They very rarely question why things are done a certain way and how things are done. And often those same dancers become part of the management. And so you see someone that has never experienced any other way of doing things, that has gone from the age of 9 to the age of 60 in one institution, thinking this is the way things should be done. And of course, I was a pain to those people. I was a complete nightmare. Because
that's what I was thinking.
Of course, not only did I question it, but I knew the history. So when they said to me, this is how it's always done, I would say, no, actually, 50 years ago, this is how you used to do it. And I find that more interesting. Why are we not doing it like that? So I understand that I'm not an easy person to manage, and I'm not an easy person, to work with sometimes, because I need to understand the why constantly. I need to understand of why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? And how can I then use my skill set, my passion, my work ethic, and my ambition to fulfill this? And if I don't agree, then I need to understand, okay, you still want me to do this, but you're not giving me any reason, so I have no motivation. I don't understand it.
There's a portion of people in charge of organizations who are partly there because they don't accept being managed by anybody else. They're often the ones that end up transforming their industries. But so it's great to hear you talk about it that way. That's a nice link into something else I wanted to talk about tomorrow, which is adaptability, and not so much as a dancer, but in terms of your role. So you talked when you went into ENB to be the artistic director, how excited you were to be a dancing artistic director. So someone who was connected and part of the company who put on the performances, so that you understand what's important to the dancers, and you're part of that. You're much closer to the actual core function of the company. That itself was a transition, but perhaps an easier one to make than the one you're making at San Francisco now, which is as a non-dancing artistic director. And in our work with leaders and organizations, we talk a lot about personal transformation, how it's important to constantly be adapting to the needs of the situation or the context that you're in, particularly as a leader. I'd love to hear a little bit of your experience of where those key transitions or those personal moments of personal transformation have been for you.
I mean, I think I've been very fortunate in that I have been able to manage my retirement from the stage at my own pace, which is not usual for dancers. Often it comes with an injury, or it comes at an age, like some institutions like Paris Opera have a specific age that you stop dancing, whether you are able or not. So
it's very French.
Yeah. It's because they're always done it like this, you see. But and so it just I was very fortunate that I was able to slowly walk away, and in service of something else, again with a reason, with a clarity of the mission. When I first walked into that role, I needed to bring my audience to English National Ballet. Audience was not going to the company. I had an audience in the United Kingdom. I had an audience globally, so I knew I could use my reputation to enhance and bring those audiences back to the company. That was not really so much the case here in San Francisco. San Francisco Ballet is a much healthier organization. They have good audience numbers. Of course, we're growing them, and that's what we always want to do. We want to attract a bigger audience pool. But I did not have a reputation here, actually, as a dancer. I had never danced in San Francisco. I had danced very little in the United States, mainly in New York. And so there wouldn't be an addition. I will say I would going to be draining instead of adding. And so there was no purpose for me to be on the stage. And yeah, I felt that my role would be better as just the manager instead of the player manager in this occasion. So it wasn't so hard. I was ready. It made sense. There was a reason to do things this way. And I think the things that I'm learning by observing is the intensity of the season here is very different from any other company. We perform from December to May, that's the season of performances, and then we rehearse from June to December. So it's like a world of two halves. And so what I'm learning now is how much can a company absorb of new material and creation when it has such a compressed season, and then how much does the audience demand of the variety of repertoire, and where do we strike the right balance to allow the dancers to have a healthy transition between repertoire, but also still provide enough variety of repertoire to the subscribers to continue to stay loyal to the company. So that's kind of my challenge now, because when you experience it, you learn it much faster. When you are in the studio with the company, you learn that very quickly. You feel it in your body. When you are not in the studio, you need to observe, and you need to listen, and you need to talk a lot more with the teams, because there is a tension. The marketing team would like to have many more programs, and the artistic team cannot deliver anymore. So we need to work together to find that right balance. And so now I feel that my role is, in a way, a little bit more complicated to really fine-tune it. But that's where, but I don't think I could do it any other way, because I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't be a plus to the organization if I was on the stage either.
I see. So you've described there how there's more communication, more listening, more balancing priorities. So it's quite interesting, which must have felt very different to being a dancing artistic director as you were at the ENB. So your time allocation, your focus, even your core skills as a leader ultimately change based on the context that you're in.
It does, but also I knew ENB upside down. I was a dancer of the company for 3 years before, and of course, being at the Royal Ballet, I continued to go and see the company. So I didn't need as much time to understand the organization. I knew everybody in it. The dancers that were on the stage had been my colleagues. So I kind of didn't need as much time to read the room. As coming to an institution that I followed from afar, I've seen perform a few times, but actually until you are in it and you experience the first season, you really don't know if what people are telling you is right, and also especially when you have a diverse and conflicting information, as is often the case when there is tension between the finances and the physical capacity of a corps de ballet.
Made more of a challenge by what you said earlier, which is you really lean in your first season. So obviously the tempo is higher. So you're trying to interpret and learn all these things at the same time as leaning in, as you say. So with just a level of intensity. I'd like to finish off with a couple of sort of slightly wildcard questions. But before we do that, what lies ahead for you, Tamara? So we've talked a lot about your experience in the past. It's remarkable what you've achieved. And as you say, doing it on your terms, which I've heard other interviews that you've given in the past. And it's always portrayed a really deliberate approach to how you plan your career, how you learn, how you progress. But just because you've stopped being on the stage, you talk about retirement from the stage. I don't think you've retired from the broader stage. So what lies ahead at San Francisco and perhaps more broadly?
I mean, all performing arts organizations are going through a really difficult time. The post-pandemic audience is very difficult to predict. This season has been great, but I need to continue to lean in the growing of the audience and bring in these wider voices to the art form, whether those are fashion designers or composers or choreographers or the wider perspective, so that the art form continues to be relevant and exciting, and people want to be part of it on and off the stage. So I need to kind of, I think this is the right route. I think this season has proven that we are in the right direction. Now we need to solidify the direction. We need to do a more long-term kind of strategic planning of how we are going to create this new repertoire. How are we going to tour internationally? How are we going to present ourselves? So the next steps are one of solidification, I don't know if that's a word, but of the vision and the working patterns and all of that, and the finances, and that takes at least 2 to 3 years more. And then you kind of get into the smooth ride. I felt that for INVI it was year 5, season 5, that felt okay. Now we're going fast, and I think San Francisco is bigger. Sometimes bigger institutions take a little longer, but I also think it changes fast. It's not an institution that has fallen in love with itself. It's an institution that wants to be exciting, wants to be created, wants to be innovated. I think it's the nature of San Francisco itself, having Silicon Valley so nearby. They have that innovative hunger. And so I think, again, in 2 or 3 years, we will be able to, be on the road that just feels smooth and forward, regardless of what happens. Well, unless there's another pandemic, but I hope there isn't. Personally, this is where I see myself. I do commit to things. I want to do a good job. I want to look back with pride. So I think this is where I see myself for at least another 5 to 10 years. And that's enough for me, more than enough for me.
San Francisco are lucky to have you. And I know that there were talks in the past about you replicating the EMB model in Spain, but the energy went out of that. I think the connections you make beyond your industry, your immediate narrow industry, I have a feeling will continue to feature in your career, because it's that creativity and the expansion of the thought process, I think, does drive not only the engagement of the company, but engagement of audiences as well. So we like to ask our podcast guests to make an analogy of liken their organizations that they lead, or even their industries, to groups of animals, collective nouns, something in the natural kingdom. It doesn't have to be animals, it can be insects. What would it be for maybe the San Francisco Ballet or ballet companies generally? What would you use as your analogy?
I mean, I know this has been used before in your podcast, but I am going to reclaim it for our art form because we are the swans. Nobody else can be a swan if we are not the swans. But more than anything, because swans are fierce, they're resilient, they're incredibly strong, they are determined and elegant. And this is true, the analogy of like in a performance, what you see is the floating, the elegance, the delivery of something that seems seamless and effortless, when actually underneath there is all the work behind the scenes and the padding and the keeping afloat in every possible way. So I think it is a true analogy, but it's also, I think, because obviously the elegant strength, I think, is very specific to the ballet world.
Then I think we can consider the swan reclaimed. I will speak with Sam Gouldsworthy and tell him he can't have the swan. He has used it for the marketing for Simpson with
We
Kim.
may be able to share, we don't have to be exclusive.
I think the paradox of the elegance and the strength, the fierceness and the gentleness is so intrinsic to ballet, and it's one of the things that most fascinates me. And the hard work and the apparent effortlessness, it's full of paradoxes, which I think make it such an interesting art form. So Tamara, and personally, a song, something that best describes your leadership journey. We're creating quite an interesting playlist with what people are saying, but what song would you choose for you to encapsulate your journey so far?
Oh, I should have thought about this. This is so difficult. I thought about it when we first talked about, and then I forgot, and then I haven't thought about this. I'm sorry, this is terrible. I should have thought about this. What song? But is it my personal journey or art form or
your
both?
personal journey? What speaks to you in terms of either a song that's accompanied you along the way, or the words that are particularly powerful for you in terms of your philosophy, your experiences?
I don't know that this is anything to do with my philosophy at all, but it's a song that I love and that has been part of my life since I was a child. Leonard Cohen rendition of Take These Walls, which is a poem by Garcia Lorca, who is obviously a Spanish poet that we study when we're a kid. There's something kind of melancholic and joyous at the same time that is just very moving. So I'm going to go with that, but I don't know that it actually reflects anything about me other than I like it. And I like his voice.
The fact it came to you instinctively is perfect. And is it about breaking down the walls?
No, I don't think it is.
Not for me.
I don't know. I need to think about what it is about.
Yeah, maybe just the voice. Tamara, thank you so much.
But if it is about taking down the walls, then it should be the famous British song, "The Other Brick in the Wall." Let's go with that one.
Okay. Pink Floyd.
Let's go with that one.
Very good. And that's how I see from outside. It seems to be your life and your professional life so far. Tamara, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed the conversation. As I said at the start, I expected many things to come out which were not confined to ballet, and that very much you over-delivered on that. So thank you. Good luck with your season. I know it started positively, so good luck with it, and good luck, and thanks so much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Tamara. Bye-bye.
Thank you.